Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I am Steve Ward, along with Susy Bastille. Andy Mercer is unable to be with us tonight. The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer a little over half a decade ago. And we have always pursued the mysteries of the unknown with interesting guests. Well, Susy, I guess it's just you and me tonight. So I like to tell people that we are like beacons on a fog-shrouded night. I think I stole that from Larry King, but
that's very cinematic. I like the imagery of that.
So please remind people who you are and how they can find out about you and your work.
So I am sometimes called the Pukwudgie Whisperer. You can find me on YouTube under that. And I deal mostly with Pukwudgies, the little people in the Bridgewater Triangle. It does take right now a blood sacrifice to summon me. But I do still take Pukwudgie sightings. You can go to pukwudgies.blogspot.com and use the contact form there if you have one for me.
Have you gotten anything recently? Any reports?
Not in the last few months. I got a pretty decent one that I'm actually hoping to run past our guest tonight and get his take on it, because there was some interesting things that went along with that one. I'll say.
Very good. Well, let's introduce our guest. Dr. Simeon Hein is the author of Black Swan Ghosts, a sociologist encounters witnesses to unidentified aerial craft, their occupants, and other elements of the multiverse. This book, now in its second edition, is filled with 18 original witness cases from those brave enough to come forward and tell us what they've seen, including former NASA, former government intelligence and aerospace workers, retired Air Force pilots, and many others. He also wrote Opening Minds, a journey of extraordinary encounters, crop circles, and planetary intelligence over 20 years ago. His most recent book is Dark Matter Monsters, Cryptids, Ball Lightning, and the Science of Secret Life Forms. This book examines the science and witness accounts behind mysterious cryptid encounters, including Bigfoot. Why are these creatures often associated with orbs, sudden temperature changes, and electronic interference? Simeon, welcome to the show. Welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Thanks, Steve and Susy. Thanks for having me here today.
Well, heck, I don't even know where to begin. It's been a little while since I've read Dark Matter Monsters. It needs another reading or two because it's for me it's very revolutionary. I mean, your ideas. Can you kind of summarize a little bit for people that are not familiar with that book? What how you compare the phenomena of cold fusion and paranormal phenomena.
Oh, well, thanks. It was a very challenging book to write. I got the idea from doing a long-term investigation into what's been called cold fusion. It has other names: low energy nuclear reaction, coherent energy transformations. I got involved with the Bigfoot side of it from my remote viewing students in Colorado. I've been teaching remote viewing in Colorado since 1997. And I first learned it in 96. And the Colorado natives would tell me their Bigfoot encounters. And this is over a couple decades. And, I'm as thick as anyone else, so it didn't really sink in. Silence your phones, please.
Yes.
How unprofessional, Steve.
No kidding. And what stunned me is there's a name on here I've never seen before, so that's kind of scary.
Well, that's typical. Maybe it's Indrid Cold or something like this.
Well, somebody just wished me a happy Indrid Cold day today.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So I heard about Bigfoot. I had seen the Patterson-Gimlin film in the 70s as part of a preview to a movie that I went to as a teenager. So I was aware of the Bigfoot idea. But growing up in New York and the East Coast, it wasn't something that I ever heard anyone ever talk about. Not once can I remember anyone ever talking about anything. even related to these topics. So when I went out west for graduate school, and Grover Krantz was just upstairs from me at WSU, where I got my PhD, Pullman, Washington, who was one of the main academics to first start studying Bigfoot. I didn't know him, but I mean, it was sort of around. The topic was around, but I guess for me, it was encountering people who had encounters. And then, like a lot of curious people, I just went to some conferences. I talked to people at those conferences, and I was really astounded, Steve, to hear of these electromagnetic effects being around Bigfoot, which for me were very reminiscent of what I had seen studying crop circles in the UK. The remote viewing subject led me to crop circles just because that's the type of target people would occasionally want to do. People like to use RV to investigate the unknown. So I went on some crop circle tours and then kept getting involved in the topic, leading tours myself there for a number of years until very recently. And so I had seen these weird electromagnetic effects, and I saw it around Bigfoot. Witnesses and the lecturers at these conferences talked about the same thing and more. They talked about transparency, sparkly lights, orbs. They talked about strange kind of PK effects, objects moving around in the presence of these creatures inside their vehicles. And this really hooked me into the whole Bigfoot and cryptid topic, was just my experience in the crop circle, seeing batteries and cameras fail. So I knew that vortex type circular patterns, even in wheat, could have these non-ordinary electromagnetic effects. But to hear it happening around what were allegedly biological entities really threw my mind for a loop. And I've been really, it's just kind of a curious person studying it ever since. And was sort of the genesis of Dark Matter Monsters, was what do we see around Bigfoot cryptid encounters that we see around other paranormal encounters, around UFO encounters? You mentioned my book, Black Swan Ghost. Is there some sort of underlying reality that informs all of these topics that we've never really talked about? And I thought I can see some connections here, and that became the basis of Dark Matter Monsters.
I know that initially cold fusion was very controversial, and the people that were discovering it were laughed at and said that they were faking it and making it up. Is it pretty much accepted now? Where does this lie now? Cold fusion in the realm of science and the acceptance of.
No, it's a good question, Steve. And Fleischman and Pons, the two researchers at the University of Utah, were really pilloried by the academic community. Their university wanted them to hold a press conference so the university could get the patent rights to the process. Fleischman and Pons didn't want to do this. As you know, in academia, the normal route is to go through a peer-reviewed published paper.
Right.
And the university pushed them to hold a press conference, which other people found kind of, a little on the garish side. Normally, you don't hold press conferences in science unless you're at the very end of the research and you can finally announce something. So they received a lot of hostility from the research community, which I don't think was very well deserved. They didn't call it cold fusion. Other people called it cold fusion. It's not really cold fusion. We don't have neutrons fusing at room temperature. And this is the problem intellectually a lot of physicists and electrochemists had with the process. Nonetheless, it is a real process. There is something going on there. It's been reproduced thousands of times by different labs around the world. It has a newer name called low energy nuclear reaction. And there's another name, coherent energy transformation, since it seems to have something to do with coherent matter, something akin, analogous to a laser like that, but with atoms of material. And I think based on our own Department of Energy's interest in the subject, particularly a company called Proton 21 Labs from Kyiv, Ukraine, which I'm told that they actually absorbed into the DOE program, that this is an established process that does really work. We've had many other researchers, Ken Shoulders, who worked with Hal Puthoff in the remote viewing program, also in OSAP, the government UFO program that went till about 2011, I believe 2012, later replaced by ATIP. There have been a number of researchers, Takeaki Matsumoto, who we've learned about recently, who did a lot of really detailed experimental analysis of the process. It is a real process. It creates transmutation, new elements. And Steve, it creates a lot of effects that, in my mind, are seen around Bigfoot cryptid encounters, which is why I think there is a connection there. And other states of matter, hence the connection to dark matter. But I have to add one element here, which is important. The government often encourages us to laugh at topics that the government doesn't want to be known more widely by the public because it's part of classified special access programs. So there's a second component here we need to look at is, if it is something that doesn't really have much science behind it, why has DOE invested a lot of resources into what we call cold fusion? Google attempted to replicate it recently for a cost of about $14 million, but they didn't quite do it the way other people have replicated it. They didn't get the same results. So it's still a controversial subject, but I think if you take the time to look at the research and the research tradition in this area, going back to Fleischmann and Pons and even earlier and looking at Russian, Soviet research, you're getting pretty much the same type of effect every time. At one of the conferences, I heard from a researcher from Italy, Vittorio Violante from ENEA, the top energy research government lab in Italy. And he told us point blank, they had reproduced cold fusion numerous times. They hadn't quite got it to the point where it was a sustainable reaction that could be put into technology that would generate unlimited energy, but they had seen the excess heat. They were convinced it's real. It's just a very challenging reaction to get going. It's more akin to like a musical symphony where all the notes have to be in tune. And if something's out of tune, the reaction will stop. That's my way of thinking of it. And so just like any early technology or scientific discovery, it's going to get a lot of ridicule because people who are already established, like in hot fusion, the hot fusion tokamak reactors, CERN, big government-funded projects to the tune of billions of dollars, they don't want any competitor coming along that can do this on a tabletop for a few $100, right? So in my mind, just as a sociologist, there are multiple reasons why other scientists ridicule it, and it has nothing to do with the veracity of the process. It has to do with people protecting their turf. You had this happen to Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell, too, by the way, with the invention of electromagnetism, their opponents at the time. And we were just talking about this a few minutes ago, Susy, about being interviews and who's interviewing you and so forth. Their opponents at the time were the Newtonians back in the 1800s, who didn't want to accept the idea of fields. They were into direct interactions, the way Newton thought of it, reaction, force and reaction, like a complementary process, the Newtonian laws of physics that describe how particles interact and physical things interact without fields, just through some sort of gravitational interaction. But the electromagnetic view of the world helped create radio. It created television, electronics, the internet, iPhones, other types of phones. I mean, it's everywhere in our lives now, but the people that could have accepted it at the time were hostile to it. So we shouldn't take the hostility of other researchers to cold fusion as any indication of whether the results are real or not. Similarly, with these types of topics that we like to talk about here, Bigfoot, cryptids, UFOs, paranormal, people have their own turf established. And guys, I've seen this happen in our own subject area. People kind of stake a claim on a certain explanation, and they will be very hostile to other researchers that you would say, hey, you guys are in the same field. How come, no, nobody wants to share their turf. And it's no different between science and people that study weird science, like I like to study fringe science, because the fringe science today becomes the science fact of tomorrow.
Yeah, I know Matsumoto has been pretty controversial, and he's been met with some opposition, but I found it interesting. In Dark Matter Monsters, you talk about the micro black holes and the micro ball lightning.
Right.
In the Bridgewater Triangle, you see, I don't know if you would want to call it ball lightning, but we have orbs a lot. And people always like to call them swamp gas. I have seen swamp gas, and I have seen one of these orbs. We call them Taipei Wonkas here. One is a ball of energy, and it's distinctly different. And that part of the book reminded me very much of my experience and other experiences that I've heard about. But another thing that happens there, and I think it was Ken Shoulders that talked about this, there is this large, like, shadow figure, darker than blackness, he's described as. It's always seen with those balls of light. So can you speak a little bit more about the micro ball lightning and those types of theories?
No, excellent question, Susie. I mean, you're really capturing the heart of what the argument is here, which is that these phenomena of orbs, ball lightning, micro ball lightning, Hess-Dahlen lights, lights that are seen over paranormal hotspots, Bradshaw Ranch, Marley Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch. People have looked into this. Highly qualified physicists have looked into this. And I'm mentioning the work of like David Freiberger of Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, DOE funded. And he calls them mobile luminous objects. And he says they are all part of the same family of objects. There may be variations, and it doesn't exclude the idea that there's some intentionality or consciousness that seems to be associated with some of these objects. The way they move around, they really seem intelligent. But the physical explanation of how they exist seems to come down to some sort of variation of Maxwell's equations that our modern science hasn't looked at very much, because we're used to basically electric currents with some magnetic charge, and these are more magnetic entities with some electric component. So they're like magnetoelectric. That's just one explanation. Freiberger called the basis of all these objects vortons, like a vortex mixed with a magnetic element. But you're absolutely right. Takeaki Matsumoto believed that's what he saw, and he was an experimental physicist. So he had these photo emulsions. He did tons of underwater spark discharges and recorded these little glowing things moving along the wires, which he believed was the basis of what at the time was called cold fusion. Ken Shoulders, like you're mentioning, also did research. He did it more with pulse discharge devices. He was a microelectronics specialist. He believed he was also looking at micro ball lightning. And you're right. He did Shoulders. And I just did a video of this for my YouTube channel that I uploaded yesterday or Friday. And he argued that this created a dark world, that there are dark versions of these orbs and ball lightning that you won't see, but could be in the space you're in. And Shoulders went as far as to suggest that there are life forms based on this dark ball lightning, hence one of the connections to dark matter. It's not the only way to get to dark matter. There's also these atomic processes with relic neutrinos and so forth, a type of dark matter. But Ken Shoulders extrapolated on what he saw. And this is someone that worked for ARPA. He worked for SRI. He worked on allegedly some classified programs to create microelectronics for government systems that are now in all of our phones. The way microelectronics is put together on a circuit board. He was the one who imagined that this led to other types of life forms that are in the same space around us, but slightly decoupled from us. So if you do see them, if they do make their way into our reality, Susie, they're going to look a bit weird. They could look dark, transparent, because they change the speed of light through permittivity. Permittivity is going lower with these objects, micro ball lightning to ball lightning. Lower permittivity leads to a blue shifting, so they might look bluish and they might look blurry. So there's a range of characteristics that when I looked at it, again, Steve, going back to your question, I said, this sounds like paranormal phenomena. At least it's things that I've experienced, taking pictures in crop circles, having them come out blurry, blurry, blurry. Like, what is this crop circle doing to my freaking camera and other people's cameras? And then you often hear this as an accusation against researchers who take pictures of Bigfoot or have seen Bigfoot and give us very detailed descriptions. Their pictures come out blurry looking. Right. Or they say the creature looked blurry or was transparent in banded sections. And then how many ghost photos have we seen that look blurry? And then, Steve, I'm reading the researcher of some of these Russian cold fusion researchers. I'm thinking of I.M. Shakparanov as one of them, who created these kind of ball lightnings using a Mobius strip. It was a very ingenious way of slamming electrons together with a Mobius strip by, the MC Escher thing where it flips over and it's like this infinite loop. You can build one electronically. And he said they found a blue mist being emitted from their cold fusion reactors. And their photos came out blurry. And he photographed these dark blotchy spots, which look to me like the types of things that people have seen. You're familiar with these witnesses who've seen these dark orbs, and they talked about it at Skinwalker Ranch, James Lukatsky, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. I even asked Jay Stratton about this once. He was at a conference, and I just said, Jay, are you talking about black ball lightning? Remember these orbs that frightened them, or whatever that dark thing was on the path that, they did wanted to sleep with the lights on after seeing this thing. It invoked a fear response, right, as they got closer. As they backed off, the fear feeling went away. Sounds electromagnetic, doesn't it? And he said, well, it could be, or maybe that's just the way your brain's interpreting it. We don't really know what it is. But these are kind of the connections, guys, that I think you can make between these subjects. Now, I'm not saying I'm inherently right. I could be wrong. There could be another explanation for all of this. But it just seems based on my experience in the time I've been on Earth, of all the subjects I've been exposed to, including as a kid building electronic kits from Radio Shack and Heathkit when I was like, 10 years old, just for fun. There's too many connections here to ignore. The sudden temperature changes that people get around all types of paranormal phenomena, including UFOs, the electronics failure, the time loss, the sense of mental confusion. I'm suggesting that these are connected because they're coming from some underlying related phenomena. If it's something else, I'm happy for someone else to suggest an alternative. But to me, it seems like a ball lightning, dark matter type phenomena, just based on all of this other research where the cold fusion researchers say the room got suddenly cold. As I mentioned, Shakparanov was another saying the pictures came out blurry. It sounds to me like something very similar. So to go back to your question, Susie, it's kind of a long-winded answer. Those types of orbs, you could make the argument. I mean, there could be other explanations, but you could make the argument that they're all variations. They're part of the same family of mobile luminous objects, which are based on another type of Maxwellian symmetry, a fractal basis. We can go into what that is. That's closed in, that concentrates rather than the normal types of electromagnetism from radio and radio emissions that we're used to, that spreads out. This sort of concentrates and it builds and it goes down to the quantum level and generates a lot of energy from that type of compression.
Any idea why that would happen more frequently in one area? I know earthquakes can sometimes cause ball lightning. That wasn't the case when I saw that orb. Actually, that was the first thing I checked was for seismic activity. But is there something that could make that happen in nature spontaneously or happen more often in certain areas?
No, that's another great question. It's something I've puzzled over for years. Why these certain areas? If the ideas I'm telling you are true, why isn't it spread out evenly over the planet? You don't generally see balls of light coming up your street. Though people do sometimes, but I mean, these seem to be concentrated in certain areas. I think it has to do with the particular types of crystals and chemical elements in the soil that generate static charges. Those static charges under certain conditions can create, as you mentioned a few moments ago, Susy, the Ken shoulders, like charge separation, the basis of all of his work. Charge separation leading to these exotic vacuum objects, or you call them electron vortexes, the different names for this, but we're talking about static electricity. Okay, let's break it down, keep it simple at the high school level. We're talking about types of static, long-lived types of static. You see this when you walk across a rug or you touch your pet, or you even see it on the sheets at night, certain types of sheet materials on your bed. In the dark, you'll see those little sparkles. That's what we're talking about. When it sustains itself on a longer term basis, it can form its own containment field and become a long-lived plasmoid. So to answer your question, based on my research, places like Skinwalker Ranch and the San Luis Valley, where I spent some time recently at the SNPI 25 conference, which is open to the public next year, by the way. If you do your research into the soils of those areas, you have a lot of gilsonite at Skinwalker. You have a lot of silica in San Luis Valley. If my theory is right, you should have some type of mineral in those soils that's conducive to building up static and charge separation. Silica builds up one type of charge separation. I believe it's the positive type, gilsonite the negative type. Gilsonite being one of the major elements in asphalt. It's a very, I have some of it around here. It's a very lightweight, dark material that is used in asphalt, but it also creates a lot of static and charge separation. In Simeon's view of this, and I'm happy for it to be proven wrong, this is caused by a abnormally high concentration of some mineral in the area that leads to these charge clusters, exotic vacuum objects. And I'm not reducing this. Don't think I'm a reductionist here, just trying to explain this away. I'm saying this leads to other types of life forms being there. That's what we're talking about, is some type of life forms like that type of charge. And they live around it. Maybe it's like a food for them or their energy source. They cluster around this type of static. I've seen the ball lightning too, Susy, in the crop circles, because we detected a lot of static around those crop circles with our Trek 21 meter from a company in Medina, New York, that sells these mobile static charge detectors. And we detected really vast changes in static in some of these crop circles. And you also see these orbs around the crop circles. So kind of putting it all together, in my view, this is a result of charge clusters building up in certain parts of the planet, and life forms and other types of things. We don't even have the vocabulary to describe what these are. Some of them look flesh and blood. I'm willing to go there, yeah, with Bigfoot and others, but there are other aspects of Bigfoot that don't fit just a purely physical model without the quantum mechanics. So that's what I think, Susy. I mean, what do you think? Do you think there's another reason? Could it be the history of the area? Civil War battlefields, lots of mayhem and destruction and violence, leaving souls behind. I don't know. There could be other reasons too.
Yeah, I've always felt it was some kind of energy based, whether it's energy from humans, like they say, ley lines are popular in England, but a lot of them are the paths in between two churches. So you'd have people walking these lines for centuries, right? So like the imprint of the energy from those peoples may have created the ley lines. If I don't like the the battlefield or the Native American curse theories at all.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Because the entire country would be haunted and have all this activity.
True. The entire country had a lot of violence.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
think of all the
it would be
bison that
hard.
were exterminated just to get at the Native Americans' food supply. So,
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, from what you're saying, it does kind of make sense. Like, humans cohabitate like near freshwater sources, rivers, and things like that.
Right.
So maybe these things are just living near whatever their energy sources.
No, Susan, another great point. I was reading freaking Science magazine. I love Science magazine. Been reading it for 3 decades, ever since grad school. There was an article about how streams and waterways create natural charge separation just from the colliding water molecules against rocks and moving along the riverbeds, and the water molecules create charge separation. So maybe that's why we're attracted to streams and water flow, is there's a kind of a charge there. Maybe, hey guys, maybe we're getting energy from that too without even knowing it. It's like subconsciously we like to be around energized areas with a lot of charge clusters.
And I have like an ongoing joke at work that if we need to come up with a solution to something, I say, okay, I'll think of it when I'm doing dishes tonight or when I'm in the shower tomorrow. It's always when I'm touching water, I get good ideas.
Yes, that's a really good point. Yeah, because I get ideas in the shower too and doing dishes just like you do, and running water.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. Hey, we're making some progress here.
We're figuring stuff out.
We were really figuring stuff out. I think what you're talking about has something to do with it. I think there's a physical component, a chemical component, but that doesn't mean what we're talking about is really easy to understand. We're not going to explain it all the way and just be on NPR with some sort of glib reporting. Oh, we explained ghosts. It's just some sort of static charge, you know. No, let's take the Shoulders point of view. He called them dark organizations with ghostly properties coming out of black ball lightning. Okay? Black EVOs, the micro ball lightning. Even Takeaki Matsumoto, who you mentioned, just most meticulous researcher. I mean, he took notes on everything. Bob Greenyer went over there, part of the MFMP, Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Matsumoto passed away last year, and to collect all of his papers and bring everything back and all his videotapes. And it was every letter he ever got from any researcher. He had made notes. Just incredible. He called it, he said he could see micro black holes in the film emulsion, these dark spots. I don't know if that's literally what they are, but they're really weird looking, completely black spots in the middle of his little cold fusion experiments. Again, that he did with wires underwater. So it's a very good question whether this leads to another realm of life. That's what I think's going on. I mean, I don't think any hard scientists would want to go in that direction because the giggle factor and everything else that you alluded to, Steve, at the beginning. I mean, this is sort of what keeps people from having the courage to go off in new directions. Fortunately, I mean, the education I had, guys, going to, as I mentioned, to Susy, Wesleyan, and then Hampshire College and Amherst, these were very independent thinking institutions that taught me, at least, to evaluate arguments and look at other possibilities and consider the evidence, and that the conclusion you may come up to is not a popularity contest. You just follow the data. You follow the logic. Doesn't mean it's instantaneously apparent, but over years of looking at subjects and you keep seeing the same pattern, you just follow it. Now, maybe people are going to think it's weird, but I mean, tough, because everything that's ever been invented has seemed pretty weird. You know, Nikola Tesla, Marconi, think of all these inventors in the past. There was an inventor who invented radio, who detected radio waves in his lab, Thomas Hughes. Before Hertz, Heinrich Hertz, who's credited with inventing the idea of radio. An American came up with it and people laughed at him, said, you can't have invisible energy waves. They called it imponderable. Even temperature was laughed at. Ponderable. That's what's so beautiful about the history of science. Everyone's always laughed at anything that's now just a basic part of our lives. So if they're laughing now, that means it's real, in my view. I mean, it's a good chance you're on the right track. That's what you're looking for, is the ridicule, the hostility, the negativity, the sheer arrogance. That tells you you're on the right path. You're really hitting a nerve, because that's a mammalian defense against a new worldview. So I look for that as a reaction to my research, as a sign of being on the right track. It may not make you the most popular person in the universe, but you have the satisfaction of waking up every day knowing you're really getting into the thick of what's going on. And that is its own reward, just to feel like you're really dealing with reality, even if almost everyone else in your life, and people that don't get it, don't want to go that direction. Every scientist who's done anything new. Einstein, people laughed at Einstein. When I was in the stacks at Wesleyan one time, Susy, I came across a book, 100 Scientists Prove Einstein Wrong. 100 scientists against Einstein. We don't remember a single one of those scientists anymore. It was one paper after another. I wish we didn't have cell phones back then. I wish I could have taken a picture of this. Those guys or gals sort of think, oh, we know better than that foolish guy with his, relativity theory. And that's what it's like. It's really tough. So, guys, I don't know. I kind of relish it, but that's just me. Go ahead, laugh. I care.
One of the first paranormal books you read was The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel.
That's true.
And of course, Keel recognized early on the high strangeness about all this, and he was trying to come to grips with. He kind of hypothesized a super spectrum, and that do you see? And another thing about his, he was kind of vague about what was really going on. Suggested, I guess, some kind of intelligence or whatever that would somehow interface with us. But he also seemed to suggest that we co-created some of this, that some of these manifestations throughout time would change shape and so forth, depending on the sort of the mass consciousness. Do you see any parallels with dark matter monsters and some of Keel's ideas?
No, that's a really great question, Steve. Keel was one of the first books I ever read on this subject, and that was as a teenager. I don't know how I came across it, but there it was. I mean, those books were chilling.
Yeah.
They still give me the chills just thinking about it. And I think it must have sunk in deep into my mind and emerged later as dark matter monsters after. Because, it's not something I thought about, Steve. It's not like something every day, John Keel, it kind of receded as, we're all concerned with our professional lives, going through academia. I never heard anyone mention any of this anywhere. No one. It was just not something that people talked about in the circles that I grew up in back on the East Coast, in those types of schools and those types of high schools and everything. It was very kind of preppy, if you know what I mean. And the people did not go in this direction. They were really concerned about their future careers, even in college. But I think Keel was on the right track, because he's suggesting to us that this is some sort of part of life on Earth that we don't understand very well. It doesn't have to be extraterrestrial.
Right.
There's something Jacques Vallée point he's stressed many times. The UFO researcher, computer inventor, apparently the guy that one of the people invented the internet, Jacques Vallée. But yeah, it's part of our reality. And I think, you see references to this throughout history, even going back to the Bible, in my case, the Old Testament. I've heard rabbis I've been in contact with talk about this supernatural world, about the creator creating this at the same time as the physical world. For some reason, you and I are more in this physical one. or at least that's what we're aware of. But I think Keel was on the right track. And I do have a short Keel story for you. We were once having this type of conversation in a pool at a remote viewing conference in Clearwater, Florida. It was sponsored by Lynn Buchanan and a bunch of us who had been trained with him. So we showed up in Clearwater. And we're hanging out in the pool. I'm hanging out with some other RVers. And one of the women I'm talking to, we start talking about exactly the John Keel, the phone ringing, disconnecting the phones ringing that were disconnected, the movie. So, okay, we all go to bed. I go back to my motel room. At about 3 a.m., the phone starts ringing and there's no one there. And it's just a very strange sound on the other side of the phone. And I hung up and it rings again. And I'm thinking, what are the odds? I mean, here we are talking about that whole genre and my phone's ringing. And there's no one. I can hear there's no one there. It's just static. It's not like breathing or anything. I mean, it's just like a dead. It's like a signal, but there's no person on the other end of the line. So I pulled the phone out of the wall. I pulled the phone out of the wall, guys. Just going. I mean, I'm thinking John Keel right there. How real is this? And I went to check with the front desk the next day, and they said no, those calls have to be routed through us. It's not an automatic system. We have to route the calls. We don't have any record last night of any calls coming to your room. So, I mean, other researchers have talked about this. Mark Macy, he did this instrumental transparent communication. Right. It's kind of another version of this with spirits, deceased people. When he asked the phone company about this, they said, it's not coming through our phone line. It's originating in your phone. He's made recordings of these calls with deceased people that he knew, other people knew, but who passed on, and they're calling back, allegedly. Right. And they said, no, it's originating in the phone, which is very Keel-like. So, yeah, I think I haven't looked at John Keel's work recently. I probably should reread it, and I know he has other books that I didn't read, but it's along the same lines. What I'm doing is suggesting a aspect of physics, condensed matter physics, that helps us move a little farther down the road. Physics that we already accept that seems to me in a not very difficult way to fit. Another researcher that's looked into this a little bit, Gerald Pollack from University of Washington, Seattle, with a fourth state of water. That water has another phase that we're not familiar with, a sort of liquid crystal phase between solid and liquid. And it has some strange properties and explains why hot water freezes faster than cool water and why you get wisps of vapor trails over your coffee when a gas normally just disperses, or even why do clouds stay up in the sky given how heavy water is? Have you ever carried water? How's it staying up there? So he explains this in the fourth state of water, and he created one idea. I just want to mention this: vortex cooling. I mean, when he talked about vortex cooling, like, okay, I'm paying attention now. Certain structures absorb heat. That's where they get their energy from. They're self-organizing. It just sounds very similar to a lot of phenomena that we study about why these life forms cool their environment. Is they're literally deriving energy from their environment. And I think that's what Pollack is talking about. So, Steve, to answer your question, I think Keel was on the right track. I think there's a physical, chemical aspect to it that hasn't been explored very much, just because people generally don't want to go in that direction and risk their career, right? Risk their tenure and popularity with their colleagues going into the spooky wooky stuff. But I think that's where, the prizes are here, is why do people experience this? What are they experiencing? Instead of saying, oh, they're hallucinating. Susy, swamp gas, right?
Yeah.
That stuff is not swamp gas. It's cool. It's cool to the touch. That's not anything burning. It's not like methane. We have to go beyond that. We've had a half a century at least of these ridiculous explanations for these phenomena. Again, Steve, going back to your original question earlier, the government's done its job for some weird reason to try to promote all of the hoax theories around this and the conventional explanations. I mean, they funded a lot of people like Donald Menzel and Psychops and all these debunkers and debunking organizations. these scoffers. It's just scoffing, and I don't think it's not a good use of our money anymore. Okay.
Susy, you had a particular question for Simeon. I didn't want you to lose that.
Yeah. So Steve and I were talking earlier, and I was telling him there has been this new factor I've been noticing in Pukwudgie sightings, and I haven't heard it before. It has only been people I've directly spoken to and had the chance to ask questions to. There was a while back where I was fascinated by the smells involved in sightings. So I started asking people, did you smell anything when this happened?
Right.
The answer I keep getting is they smelled ozone.
Right.
Have you
Totally makes
noticed
sense.
that as well?
Yes. That totally fits with the ideas we're talking about here. One of the byproducts of cold fusion of Leonard is sulfur and ozone. So
sulfur is another one, not with Pukwudgies, but paranormal a lot. Yeah.
There's that whole book, The Brimstone Deceit by is it Cutchin?
Joshua Cutchin.
Yeah, he goes through case after case where people had these smells. That to me is a transmutational process. This is like, again, purely physical evidence of transmutation going on. And ozone, sulfur are the result of oxygen 16 going to sulfur 32. It even fits what we know how chemical reactions work. Oxygen turns to sulfur in certain conditions, and where you have transmutation going on. When these entities are here, these life forms, whatever you want to call them, you get those smells left behind. Sulfur-like smells, ozone-like smells, which again suggests novel electromagnetic processes going on, and oxygen fusing to other elements that no scientist would argue can't happen. So those types of smells that you get around these phenomena, even Bigfoot, ball lightning, you read the literature, people get those sulfur type smells, the ozone smells. It's the same thing around certain types of ghost encounters, certain types of cryptids, of course, UFOs. To me, that suggests, again, without being reductionist here, just a wide range of phenomena associated with transmutation, nucleonic synthesis, alchemy, a room temperature alchemy. When we were talking about Newton before, that was his real pet idea. That's what he loved as much as anything else, was the idea of alchemy. And it looks to me, based on the research of these companies, again, Proton 21 Labs and other researchers, you can even do it through ultrasonic sound waves. You get this transmutation of elements. You end up producing different elements in the periodic table, and one of them is sulfur.
And that's why they can kind of pop in and out, because it's transmutation. There's some kind of reaction happening.
I think the transmutation is a sort of a side reaction from this. What we're talking about here is coherent matter. It's a step past plasma. It's what some of us think ball lightning and microball lightning are. It's where the atomic particles are coherently related to the other particles in frequency and temperature. You could think of it like a laser, or flocks of birds, murmurations of birds, all kind of like a wave, the way to look like a wave moving across the sky. That's an analogy for coherent matter. Lockheed Martin has a patent in using coherent matter to generate non-local effects. They use the analogy of a laser, but 1,000,000 times more powerful. So one of the effects of this coherency is for elements to come apart and then recombine in other ways. Oxygen reassembling into sulfur. So it's something we were taught, guys, in school, that is impossible, that it was just this sort of medieval idea of alchemy, that's a type of mysticism. But I think if you look at the research from this research tradition, you get a lot of elements, a lot of researchers showing different chemical elements appearing in their experiments. Mark Leclerc's another one. These are really serious researchers. In some cases, they've worked with the government. They've shown us that you get all these different elements in the periodic table, all the way lighter elements, and they get heavier. I mean, this could be one of the reasons why it's classified. I mean, you start getting into radioactive elements too. So yeah, you can produce all these elements, and the one we would smell would be the sulfur smell. So it seems to me, Susie, my understanding of it is that these coherent energy transformations, one of the effects that this has been going on is transmutation of elements. And another one is that you can look for, at least at a microscopic level, are called strange tracks. Go figure. Strange tracks. They're little hopping marks in a photo emulsion of a ball lightning microball spinning around, moving through the emulsion. As it kind of gyrates around, it leaves these little tracks. It's called strange tracks. Those are two of the symptoms of this sort of process. So this would be one sort of experiment we could do in these paranormal hotspots. If we had photo emulsions there, would we find these strange tracks on, if we looked under an electron microscope later, would we get more of that versus a control sample with less paranormal activity? Just a interesting experiment to do to see if this is right or not.
Yeah. So I'm not going to get into my feelings about Ed and Lorraine Warren, but that just took me back. When I was in middle school, I read The Demonologist, which is the book that Ed Warren wrote. And he talks about seeing this dark black ball, like misty ball forming in the corner and then smelling sulfur.
Yeah.
Maybe that was...
that's what you get.
Yeah.
You get this around orbs and micro ball lightning, and even ball lightning that comes out of thunderstorms. You know that ozone smell you get out of thunderstorms? You get that out of ball lightning too. Even after the thunderstorm is left, you know, it's people say they see this ball lightning hopping towards them. I mean, they seem to hop down the road, coming towards them or wherever they're. I've spoken to people that have seen this hiking in the Tetons, and it sort of trundles down the path towards you like it's a physical thing. And it leaves behind that smell, that ozone type smell, which suggests a highly energetic process. Not necessarily a high temperature. So we're not talking about swamp. We're not talking about anything physically burning. We're talking about something emitting microwaves, radio waves, electromagnetic energy. I mean, those things can produce heat, but the object itself is cool. But that transmutation definitely leaves some symptoms behind. If people were interested in studying this, you know, we could do experiments where we would see, is this happening or am I wrong? Do you not get this in these things? Is there another cause? The only one way to find out is to do some experiments. But you do get this in the cold fusion Leonard realm a lot. And cryptids too, you know, pick your cryptid, Dogman, Bigfoot, Pugwudgies. People sometimes say they get those sulfur smells left behind. That's where you get the brimstone, you know, devils and brimstones and all this. I think that historical literature tells us something. Yeah. But
they do seem to be some kind of a life form. I mean, people talk about having telepathic communication with Bigfoot.
Yes,
in some cases.
Yes, that's another effect. Mind speak. Yeah, I've spoken to people who've had this happen.
Actually, Ron Moorhead's daughter was Rhonda, I believe she was at a Bigfoot conference several years ago, and she got up spontaneously and talked about the bizarre experiences that she was having when she was out with her father in the Sierra Nevadas. And one time she was in the tent and she started getting these telepathic communications, and they were asking her, "Who are you? Who's that man you're with?" And so she was actually having a conversation with them, and she's very credible. So
you're saying Rhonda Moorhead?
I don't know what her last name is.
Ron Moorhead's daughter?
Yeah, her daughter, but I don't know if she has a married name or.
So that brings up a lot of other interesting effects here, like mind speak. We haven't gotten into that, but that's a big component of this. Even people that didn't believe in Bigfoot have experienced the mind speak. You listen to these different podcasts, Sasquatch Chronicles, others. People say it can sound like, even like a robotic, computerized voice talking in their head. At least that's how your brain interprets this,
Right.
the signal. And yeah, people experience this sort of mind speak. They get it before the contact. It's a very interesting component. Another aspect of this is strange sounds in and around these areas, but they're coherent sounds. Fits with coherent matter, you're going to get coherent sound. They're directional sounds. In other words, one person could hear it and the other won't, and they'll wonder if it was in their head, like you're saying, or not. But there's another explanation: is it was directed like a laser beam of light, but with sound at a certain direction, and people on the other direction don't hear it.
I wanted to ask some questions about crop circles.
Yeah.
I read your book when I heard you. I must have been on Art Bell many years ago promoting opening minds.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time. I didn't know much about crop circles. I think that was the first time I read an account where people would actually go out and meditate and create these things overnight. Now, you talked about some of the strange phenomena that shows up. Is it true that some of the high strangeness occurs with crop circles that are made by humans, and others that seem to be made through some kind of a paranormal agency? Do they both have high strangeness attached to them?
Yes, they do. In my view, that was part of the reason of writing Opening Minds. That was our surprise finding, is when we started making them. When we started paying farmers and using their fields, we would get some of those same effects in our electronics. And sometimes people would come in there later and get similar types of effects. We later just put up signs saying this is man-made, the farmer's been paid, and people didn't believe us. Yeah. They would say there's no way you could have made this. And why are we getting these weird effects? That was the big mystery to me for so many years, is why a man-made formation would do that. But if you look at again, vortex cooling, a lot of these crop circles are based around vortex patterns. They're going to act like waveguides and change the frequencies of the energy that's just in the background, creates concentrations of static, just like any vortex-based shape would in a field. And it doesn't mean that ones weren't made by UFOs or other means. I've spoken to witnesses who've seen discs flatten fields, at least in areas. It's in one of the witnesses is in Black Swan Ghosts. You can see her interview on the blackswanghost.com website. I put up the interviews. This is Louise Voves. Other people have seen weird interactions between flying discs, UFOs, and fields. So those exist too, but the people that attempted to imitate that seem to have created some, other types of effects, maybe the same effects, by virtue of the shape. Now, the traditional crop circle researchers did not want to hear this. They didn't want man-made circles intermixing with their alien-made circles. Again, talking about rigid mindsets here. And I used to be in that camp too. I would have thought, oh, humans can't do that. That's what I used to say, based on what we had heard. But what we had heard wasn't totally accurate. Humans could do this. We went out with them at night and watched them work, and they could do this. It's something you get better at with practice. You can do it in a few hours of darkness with walkie-talkies and some lasers. You can get straight lines and coordinate it. But these researchers too, these circle makers were also researchers. They thought something very spooky was going on once they made these circles. So some of them called it natural magic. They didn't consider it hoaxing. They thought it was a type of natural magic out in nature. And that's the view that I eventually accepted too, that the human-made ones have some really strange components. As you heard with Art Bell, when we did those interviews, and he was a good interviewer, Steve. You heard some of those interviews. He suggested that we create vortex patterns and put smoke over them and things. So he actually he could kind of see this a little bit. But yeah, that's my point of view on it, Steve, is that both types have interesting effects. They certainly affect our cameras, batteries, electronics. And again, I'm making the argument that these are all fundamentally some of the same effects, no matter what type of phenomena you're looking into. Some of the same effects. I'm not saying it's all 100% the same thing. Again, it's not reductionism. I'm just saying there's some parallels based on the electrodynamics of vortex-based structures interacting with electromagnetic spectrum creates charge clusters and some of the permittivity shifting effects of charge clusters that affect your electronics, whether it's made by people or it's some other entity showing up. I mean, Bigfoot, and think of all that hair. They have that very fine hair, be very good for creating static charge. People have seen them glowing. They glow blue. People have seen, and not just their eyes. I mean, their body looks glowing blue. That sounds to me like charge clusters.
Now, you've remote viewed some crop circles, the
Yep.
source, or
We have.
and what have you found?
Well, some of them did have a mysterious origin. I mean, and we can back that up with that book by The Secret History of Crop Circles,
Right.
which goes into who is the author of The Secret History of Crop Circles.
Is it? It's not Scylla. Is that Freddie Scylla?
No, Freddie. It's not Freddie. It's, well, whatever. It's The Secret History of Crop Circles. It's been reprinted. It goes into the history of crop circles going back hundreds of years, and they've been around, for a long time, and they are associated with ball lightning, vortex plasmas, plasmoids. People have witnessed this, but it doesn't mean that the bigger, more precise looking ones didn't have a human hand in it. I mean, there was a time when that kind of bothered me too, like other researchers, because you had really staked your reputation on the idea that this wasn't human reproducible, but that was not correct. Humans are more innovative than you think. They create art in ways that is not always obvious. And there was a time in history where people didn't share information like they do nowadays. We live in a culture nowadays where people share information, peer-reviewed, published papers and research, and it's all available online. You can research to your heart's content, but it hasn't always been like that. There was a time when people kept this stuff kind of concealed, and the crop circle tradition had more of that going on, like a secret field art. So it's understandable that people couldn't believe that humans could make it, but there was a time when people used something called a camera obscura to create very new types of paintings that had perspective in them and so forth, that no one quite understood how they did it for a while. So it's in the nature of art to have a level of secrecy to it. I think we saw that in the crop circles also. But that Secret History of Crop Circles is a good start to show you how there are diverse causes of crop circles. There are different causes. It's not just one thing. So,
yeah, I guess they used to call them devil twists. The things, they had different names for them. And
fairy circles.
Yeah, fairy circles, of course.
And that's even used in the scientific literature, Steve. There was an article about fairy circles in the deserts of Namibia and what could cause these circles to show up. And forgot what the explanation was, certain types of microorganisms growing there or something. That sort of conventional explanation. But yeah, devil circles, fairy circles, they have had different names over the years.
Susy?
I'm taking it all in. I'm still, I think I'm on board with, puckwudgies are the East Coast version of what's forming over in the Pacific Northwest over there. We did have a Bigfoot sighting this year in Connecticut, though.
Yeah, you did. You did. There were some in Westchester. I've been back there to New York. I've heard about some happening in Westchester, too. Tree structures. People had some video, allegedly, of something standing there next to the tree structure. So maybe it's changing. But that's interesting, Susie, that the pukwudgies are an East Coast thing, because there is a Native American term for them called the bugwas in Northwest Coast literature. But the cases I've read about them were like you're saying, we're on the East Coast.
Yeah.
They
I
were on the
actually
East Coast.
I did talk to somebody in Washington State that had a little person sighting, but they seemed different.
Different.
Like what I hear here is they're less physical here than I hear of from people in other areas. But yeah, every tribe and every country has some kind of little people folklore.
Yeah, Oregon has its own brand.
Yeah.
People have described them in their Airbnbs. You know, and as you know, they are not always nice and playful. They have a wicked sense of humor. They can be really unpredictable from my reading.
Yeah. So from my perspective, it is reactive abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are going into their woods and messing things up, you're dealing with the consequences of your action. I don't think they are inherently evil or out to get people, but they just defend themselves.
Right. They're very capable.
Yes. And just because you're little doesn't mean you're defenseless.
The Native Americans I spoke to said they're the fearsome ones. Forget the Bigfoot. The little people are the ones you got to run from.
It's the same with humans, really.
Yeah.
It's maybe someday we'll have a lexicography of all these different types of beings out there and the regions they inhabit, and we'll understand why some of them are more East Coast or West Coast or based in Oregon or wherever. Yeah, each region has its own types of creatures, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really it's really interesting, but it's you try to wrap your head around this. I mean, it's accompanied by this really bizarre phenomena, which we may begin to have an explanation for, but then to think of them as they are apparently some kind of a life form, and it's just really hard to get a grasp on that, to try and figure out how it all interfaces with reality.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, Steve, comes down to our own ego as humans, just thinking we're the be all and end all of creation. We're the high point. I just think our ego doesn't want to think of other types of beings with comparable abilities that have a different morphology and structure to them. It's a type of, I don't know where this kind of bigotry comes from. Is it biological or what, or just how we've been raised? Those are all possibilities, but we're prejudiced towards humans, thinking that we have some sort of privileged place in the universe, and it predisposes us not to want to talk about other types of life. That's my view of it. Because why would you get the same types of encounter experiences? People experience all types of these entities in these regions for decades and hundreds of years, and going back thousands of years in Native American literature and stories about these beings and entities. No, I don't think it's just something that's, I don't think it's just imagination or a misidentification of ordinary animals. I think they really exist, and we just haven't grown up enough to just accept that there's just different type of life out there. You look at even regular biological animals, there's often great resistance to believe in giant squid. At one time, the mountain gorilla, it was discovered by the Romans, then forgotten about again. And when modern researchers discovered the mountain gorilla, people didn't believe it. So there is just this tendency not to want to look into new species. And again, you have to look at the institutional biases for researchers not to want to have attention go to newer sorts of phenomena when they've staked their life in one type of form. They probably don't see any benefit to themselves of looking into these creatures, but the consistency of the reports, it's so incredible from one person to another. And people don't talk about this a lot, so they don't even have any basis for knowing what they've seen. But when you read their accounts, there's a lot of consistency. And it's not just because, in my view, because the brain is the same brain, so they're seeing the same things. I think they're really, just like we go out and see the same types of trees and birds and have similar descriptions. That's what they're seeing with these types of life. These types of life that are just more transient, and it takes a lot of maturity as a person to accept that things could exist that you can't control, that you weren't taught about, that you don't completely understand. To me, it's just human arrogance that always wants to believe it's right. And, nothing to see here, folks. Move along. That's what your brain wants to do, and it's supported by the types of school systems we have. People really are not encouraged to be curious. But if you really take the time to listen to these witnesses on your favorite podcast, read books that they've written, even Ron Morehouse, Sierra Sounds. Look how flipped out Ron is. I've talked to him a couple times. And he's been on my YouTube channel. I've met with him at conferences. I mean, what he's talking about, he didn't even believe it, but he's got the tapes, the recorders. It's recording these chattering sounds.
Right.
And you can't see them, and they're right there. And you don't see, nobody saw them. They're right outside your hunting structure, but you peek your head out, there's nothing there, but everyone's hearing it, recorders hearing it. So yeah, it may not be easy to understand, but nobody said that the universe came with this money back guarantee that's supposed to be easy to understand. Who said it was easy to? Who said it's easy to understand? That's some sort of fiction we grew up around. It's not easy to understand, but if you don't have to, but if you want to take the time to look into it, you're going to come across stuff that's, you don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is. There isn't anyone who knows what it is. I'm sorry. It's just where you end up. And we just have each other to have conversations like this, people who've experienced these things. And that's how we'll finally piece it together. And science, once again, will have shown us that it's incapable of adapting to new data, which is what Thomas Kuhn sort of suggested in his, his book about revolutions in science and new paradigms. It's just nobody wants to go to a newer version of reality. Everyone wants to stick with what's comfortable. That's where we're at with it. So those of us that are interested have to keep forging ahead and do our best and let the chips fall where they will.
And before we wrap it up, could you say a little bit about black swan ghosts? Tell us what a black swan event is.
Yes. I wrote this book because just being in these subject matters, initially just remote viewing, and then going to UFO conferences, I had encountered so many people who said, I've never told anyone this, and these are people that had worked in the government, intelligence agencies, biologists, NASA, and they had seen things. And it led me to believe that this was something that wasn't very rare after all, but it was rare to our awareness. Black swan events are events that are statistically improbable, but have a very large impact once they do happen. And it's something that's not easy to talk about because maybe there's no reference for it. In Boulder, Colorado, where I've lived for a long time, we had this flood in 2013 that was like one of these 500-year floods or 1,000-year floods. Someone was certain. No one alive had ever seen anything like this. Maybe it was a Native American lore, but there wasn't any living person who had ever seen this before. It's hard to imagine it raining continuously for a week, the types of flooding that can happen in an area that's not used to that. So it just wreaked havoc, just like hurricanes can do. But this was unpredictable. This is the sort of same type of thing with UFOs. And I would say these types of topics we're talking about in this interview, they're topics that if they went to the forefront and we had them discussed more openly, would lead to a kind of ontological shock of our whole culture. That's why I call it a black swan event. It doesn't seem believable to the average person now, But if enough evidence came forward and the credible people testified in front of Congress, people with really impeccable credentials, and I know some of these people haven't gone public yet, and I know what they could be telling us, you would have a different view of reality when they were done testifying. And we've had these witnesses come forward in these hearings recently. So basically, Steve, I encountered a lot of witnesses, missile security guards, people who had never told their story. And I just found them, and we sat down with a tape recorder. And I put a lot of these videos on the blackswanghost.com site. You can go to the videos. I put up the original videos. You can listen to these people. They are people that have great stories to tell, but because of this fear of ridicule and the giggle factor, we don't hear this. I bet there are a lot more people out there like this. So I think it's exciting as this information becomes more public. I think people gradually feel that it's okay to talk about it. And maybe we'll hear from witnesses who've seen these sorts of things or handled wreckage and so forth. Maybe even really first-class Bigfoot witnesses who we haven't heard from yet.
Right.
That really would put the subjects on the map. Wouldn't that be exciting?
Yes.
Not just Bigfoot and UFOs, the whole subject matter of cryptid life forms, non-ordinary.
I think it has changed a little bit. I mean, with the amount of TV shows and so forth. I work at the Mothman Museum, and they actually pay me to do that, to talk to people and answer questions. Don't tell my employer, Jeff Walmsley, that I would do it. I would pay him. But I was sitting on the bench out front one time, and I was talking to a lady that grew up there, and she said, back in the old days, boy, if you had an experience, you just kept your mouth shut. And from reading the John Keel, that the Scarberries and the Mallets, the other witnesses that came forward at the time, the ridicule that they suffered.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, there's still a lot of that, but it does seem like people can come forward a little easier these days and tell their story.
I think so. I think it's because of shows like this one and others like this. We're having a dialogue online, and you can watch it now. Load it up into your favorite podcast app, YouTube. There are ways to get this information, and you can consume the information in the privacy of your car or your home.
Yeah.
And you don't worry about that as much as when everything kind of came over a couple central channels. So my prediction is it's going to evolve rapidly, Steve. This is how it starts. It starts with a trickle, but it becomes a flood. Once you take your finger out of the dike that's holding up the whole thing and the leak starts, the dam can come down pretty quickly. We've seen this politically in different countries over the decades. Things can change faster than you would expect. And it would be like your sandcastles collapsing and the water rushing in when you were a kid on the beach and the whole area that you had been. That's what I see happening here. Because because linking it back to the scientific progress we could be making, just this sense of integrity of having a realistic understanding of the multiverse or universe that we live in, right? Just that, I think, natural human desire to have a kind of accurate sense of what's around us. I think that trumps all this conditioning we've had to avoid the spooky wookie woo stuff, I mean, in physics, what did they call it? Shut up and calculate. That's what the quantum physicists told us it was called. Shut up and calculate. They experienced it too. Don't talk about foundations and implications. Just do your measurements. I think I think it's changing, and I think we can look forward to seeing more discussion about this. I've seen it even in the cold fusion articles that have come out in mainstream scientific journals recently about cold fusion in geological processes deep in the earth, creating volcanoes, as you were saying before, Susy, earthquakes. That could be a Leonard-based process. I mean, where's all that magma coming from? What's heating it? It could be a Leonard process that's created. People have argued this. So I think gradually you do see this change, and I think that's a time we're living in. It makes it very exciting to be around right now.
Well, please tell us about where to find your books, your YouTube channel, and how people can get a hold of you.
Oh, thanks. Well, Dark Matter Monsters has its own website, darkmattermonsters.com, blackswanghost.com. Openingminds.info, planetaryintelligence.com. You can go to my blog site, newcrystalmind.com. I post everything there. And I have a new Patreon site where I kind of post things for members right before I put them up on YouTube for people that want to see the latest stuff I'm working on, want to have a little more communication. And my YouTube channel, people are welcome to check out my YouTube channel. And if you look at my sites, you'll see I have like free mini RV classes. You know, you don't even, you can just take some training. I put up 7 videos how to do it. Just put your email in. You can go through, about 2 hours of training or so that I just put up with a real target at the end. So
that would be great. I have dabbled with remote viewing a little bit, had some minor success, but I'm the kind of guy that wants to know things. You know, of course, the stuff that I would be seeking out, probably I wouldn't be able to get feedback. I'd be looking at places on Mars or whatever that, and who knows, you know, if it's real or not.
Right. We have a group that meets once a month for anyone who wants to join our group. Meets on second Sunday of every month. And if you just go to my website, you'll find the RV Zoom group. We have had a Bigfoot Zoom group too that people are welcome to join, but that's on a bit of a hiatus just because I was kind of busy for the past year. But we did that for over 2 years, had the most amazing witnesses join our group and tell us different sightings. You guys know the types of things that are out there, different sightings of different things. And they would say, I've never talked about this before, but I know about your group. I want to share. And I don't even have the vocabulary to describe what they saw, but it was living. That's all we'll say. It was living and it could speak to them. So there's a lot more out there. And, you know, the final word here, Steve, people should follow their curiosity and what they see with their own eyes and don't necessarily believe what you've been told. Follow your experiences, do your research, and that'll help us all move forward with this.
Well, it's really been great to have you here, and I hope you'll come back sometime.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks a lot, Steve and Susy. It's been a lot of fun.
And now I'm going to do my classic closeout here. It's not very classic, but it is a closeout. The High Strangeness Factor was created by Steve Ward and Andy Mercer and is copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I want to thank Irene Allen Block, Mark Johnson, and Andy Mercer, our fearless leaders at the network. Andy is also producer for the show and composed the closing theme. Brian Zeller composed the opening theme. You can also hear me weekly on Matt Maloney's Military X-Files on this same network. Andy Mercer, Susie Bastille, and I will be back with another installment of the High Strangeness Factor. And I am Steve Ward, a displaced Michigander, deep in the Ohio Valley, living on the same road that Mothman chased cars in the middle 60s in Point Pleasant. We'll see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.